Hi, I'm Dave Toromio back for the Sports Business Institute and Latin Business Today. And today I have a very special guest, a gentleman who, in my opinion, made probably the greatest catch in World Series history, but we'll get more into that in a second. And I'd like to introduce and welcome Ron Swoboda. Ron, welcome.
It's to be here, David.
So, Ron, let's start with the baseball career, because I know you've done a lot after your career. And we'll get into that in a second. But you started with the Mets in, what, 1965?
My rookie year, 1965, Casey Stengel's last half season as their manager. So I got to play under the legend, and it was incredible then. I always thought the guy was wise and full of wisdom. A lot of media back then thought that his rants and running on and on sentences were nonsense, and I thought there was wisdom in there if you just listen, because he was always trying to put a story in there that might teach you something. So I enjoyed my time with him. It was great. It was actually as a power hitter. I never had a better half season than I never had a whole season in home runs as good as I had a half season with Casey. So maybe I'm a little biased when it comes to that.
Yeah, well, your rookie year, what, 19 home runs? That's I think.
Well, I hit 15 of them in the first half, and after that first year, I didn't hit 15 in any full season. You know, maybe it was the slider or something. They might have figured me out. Major League pitching might have figured me out a little better than I figured them out. So,
well, just a little perspective for you. I was 4 years old in 1965. I mean, but at the end of the day, so that would have made me about 8 years old in 1969. When and by the way, Stengel is, I think, the one who really coined the phrase "amazing Mets."
Yeah, he kind of did. Amazing, 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 he would say in any time they asked him. And you know something, the general manager was Johnny Murphy. He was still alive then. Casey Stengel was still alive. I couldn't think of two people that probably enjoyed our success in '69 with the New York Mets than Johnny Murphy, who was the GM most of my time with the Mets, and Casey Stengel, you know, who started the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, people, you know, and I'm sure most people know this, but a lot of people don't. When you grow up in New York and you're a Mets fan your whole life, as I am, you know that the Mets were a byproduct of a lack of baseball and National League baseball.
Sure.
In what I still consider a National League town. I know you played for the Yankees as well. We'll get to that later.
Yeah,
that's all okay. But
yeah.
The Giants and the Dodgers leaving for California, a big void there, and that's where you come up with the blue and orange. You have the blue from the Dodgers, the orange from the Giants, and really kind of adopted by the fans. Obviously, the lovable losers, the first 3-4 were just abysmal. But I mean, people just they love the team, and then we get into some serious business in the late '60s with this ball club and a pitching staff that was just tremendous.
Yeah, and you know, you touched on it. Obviously, we had a clubhouse full of great young arms. Starting in there were some good young guys in the organization starting back in '65. I roomed with Tug McGraw. So he was there in '69. Two of the World Series wins he had on his resume before he left this earth with us and then the Phillies. Both of them were the first World Series wins for each franchise. Interesting that the Mets got it done before Philadelphia, a much older franchise.
Yeah.
But we were, when you can trade off a Nolan Ryan, whether it was a good deal or a bad deal, I'd say it was a bad deal for the Mets trying to get a third baseman.
Yeah.
And you know, when you have those kind of arms, you know, everybody comes shopping around, you know, and in spring training of 1969 now, the Braves were in very aggressive talks with the Mets, trying to lift some of their young arms and give them, Joe Torre was on the block, and they were willing to give us Joe Torre, a legitimate power hitter, you know, and something we could have used. But they wanted, you know, guys like Nolan Ryan, Gary Gentry, you know, they weren't going to get the Tom Seavers or, you know, maybe a Jim McAndrew in there somewhere. They weren't going to give them Jerry Koosman. Right. But they had a shot at some good young arms, and the Mets refused to make the deal. The Braves trade Torrey straight up and down to the Cardinals in '69 for Orlando Cepeda, and they don't get the pitching they were after. Yeah. Don't you think when we got to the National League Championship Series in '69 against those Braves that there was a connection? You know, that there was relevance there, I think, with our pitching, which they knocked around a little bit, but we got after their pitching even better. Yeah. We out-hit the Braves facing their pitching. Our left-handed platoon banged them around pretty good, and that's how we beat them 3 straight.
Yeah. Interesting, and it's interesting you mentioned trade in that year, '69, because a lot of people think, and I think I'm one of them, that the Don Clendenon acquisition – and then obviously Gil liked to platoon these guys, but Clendenon really was a big cog in that machine.
Yeah, and they gave up about 5 players. One of them was Steve Renko, who was a right-handed pitcher who really did a good job. Don Clendenon had been picked by Montreal in the expansion draft. Okay, he was not protected by the Pittsburgh Pirates, where he had a pretty good career. So he was in Montreal with Gene Mauch. Gene Mauch was trying to move him to move Clendenon to Houston for Rusty Staub. And Gene Mauch eventually came up with Rusty Staub, but when he tried to trade Clendenon, Clendenon wanted nothing to do with the Houston Astros. He didn't want to go there. Harry Walker was there. And a lot of the black guys thought Harry Walker was a racist, and they wanted nothing to do with him. And Clendenon had an alternative. He had a good job in the offseason. He was studying to become a lawyer. He had a job with the Scripto Corporation. And so, you know, he could say to baseball, he could say to the Montreal Expos, you trade me, I'm going home. And he could make it hold up. Not many of us could do that. So he was told by the new commissioner in '69, Bowie Kuhn, sit tight, stay in shape, play ball in Montreal. We'll find a place for you. And in the end of June, they found a place for him with the New York Mets. And I agree with you 100%, David. That was a key acquisition because we only gave up Steve Renko, who was a minor league pitcher at that point. He substantiated the trade. There were 4 other players that went with him, but he really substantiated the trade all by himself in his time in Montreal. Clendenon came to us ready to go and gave us a right-handed platoon at first base with Ed Kranepool and upgraded the position. Now, you may also recall that we had gone on an 11-game win streak at the end of May and into June before Clendenon showed up. And we won 11 straight against the California teams. They came into Shea, and we dusted them off. Went out to the coast, and against those same California teams, you know, the Giants, Padres, and Dodgers, we completed an 11-game run, and we vaulted in that process into the race. That's why I think the Mets made the deal for Clendenon, because I think it opened their eyes a little bit, because they didn't know what they had their hands on. And I think with all those great young arms, most of whom hadn't proven anything, they weren't in a hurry to trade guys that they weren't sure what they could do. So they refused to help out the Braves, but the deal worked for them with Montreal, and we end up with Clendenin, who was ready to go. He was the missing piece, I think, really.
Yeah, really kind of catapulted you guys, and obviously, I mean, just a team that was clicking on all cylinders, as you mentioned, getting through the Braves, getting to the World Series, and playing a team that, I mean, just, you know, position by position, the Baltimore Orioles were just loaded, and just I mean, just an immense favorite over you guys.
Yeah, and you know, nobody in our clubhouse could have argued with the Orioles being the favorite when it looked like that's who we were going to see in the World Series. I got to believe in everything you heard out of people like Frank Robinson. You know, they were tickled to death. It was us, you know, rather than the Braves. I have to believe. And maybe there was, you know, maybe there was a little taking lightly there. Maybe
a little complacency, maybe.
Say again?
A little complacency on their part, maybe, on the Orioles' part.
Maybe. I could see where, you know, look, we were this young team that had never done anything. The Braves had, you know, Henry Aaron, Rico Cardi, and of course Cepeda in the heart of their lineup. That's pretty studly little run right there. They could score runs, and they did against us.
Yeah.
We outscored them is how we beat them. But yeah, I could see where the O's thought, yeah, we got a bunch of nobodies here who've never done anything, and we're, you know, an established, competitive, you know, championship team, you know, and so they might have looked by us a little bit, you know, just a little bit.
Just a little bit. So they get to the 69 World Series, and the Mets, you know, obviously are making some plays that, quite frankly, I mean, the two AG catches.
5 runs with 5 guys on base with 2 outs. You know, when he made those plays was that game 3 or
I believe so.
Yeah. Game 3 in Shea. Yeah.
And then I'm going to share my screen with you, Ron, just for a second. I want to share this, and then I want to get your reaction. I want you to watch this, and then I want you to. Can you see this?
The Orioles have a 9-run at third now. The lead run at first is 1 away. 3 away for him in the outfield. And there's a drive to right center. Swoboda. The game is tied. Ron Swoboda making another sensational pitch for the Mets.
All right. So what? I mean,
what you saw there in in freeze frames, was the catch in right field. Also, I found out that Hodges went out there to talk to Tom Seaver. This is the top of the 9th inning. All right.
Yeah.
And Seaver's gone all the way. Tom always said he didn't have his best stuff, but he was pitching, I thought, reasonably successfully against a pretty good lineup. Hodges went out there and told him, with runners at first and third, if you get a ground ball back to you, check that runner at third. Don't just go for the double play. Yeah. He wanted to make sure that run didn't score. He felt like if we get that out, maybe we can get out of there without giving up any runs. So that was the conversation. When I was writing my book, Here's the Catch, the memoir about 1969, I asked Tom Seaver on the phone what that conversation was about. And it was one of those startling and sad in the same moment reactions. You know, Tom was then beginning to suffer a degree of dementia from Lyme disease, and he couldn't remember the conversation. He had no memory of what. Imagine that. Here's the game where Hodges comes out there at a key point in the pivotal game in the World Series, and he says to you, I want you to go home, check the runner at third. I want you to go home if he goes. We don't want to let him score and try to get a double play, okay? So that I found that out reading some other books on that moment, and it saddened me that, you know, here's Tom Seaver, one of the guys that we don't get to a World Series without Tom Seaver. Just like I don't think we get to the World Series without a left-hander like Koosman, or Cleon Jones having the kind of year he had, or Tommy Agee, or or Don Clendenin. Those guys were the key elements, I think, of that ball team. And Seaver couldn't remember it. And it was so sad just to think that those memories for me are golden, David. And the thought that something could get inside your head and steal them was tragic, just tragic. When he said, I have no memory, I felt awful. I felt awful.
And that's heartbreaking. And just one thought before I get back to that, but one of my favorite players on that Mets team, and the reason why I became a catcher was Jerry Grote. And Jerry Grote, I think, is one of the guys who doesn't get, I mean, because Grote was a light hitter, but I mean, the guy was a great receiver.
No, he made himself a tougher out.
Yeah.
At the plate, he really did, and his catching and handling of pitching back there, is without a question the difference. A name I shouldn't leave out of that list of guys.
Yeah, I mean, but at the end of the day, you know, he's not forgotten, as are any of you. And
we didn't always love him, but
he
could be a pain in the butt. But
I have read some things about. I read Shamsky's book, which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah.
But he mentioned that he was kind of surly, and you know,
he could be a little rough on you. He could be rough on some of the pitchers out there too when they weren't delivering what he wanted them to deliver. But I think on balance, you had a catcher. If you got him the ball, he could get rid of it to second base with something on it. So he made we were a tough team to steal on, and Grote took a lot of pride in not letting that happen.
It's funny you should mention that, because I can remember as a kid, you know, watching every game, and if a pitcher was a little wild, he'd step in front of the plate and just fire the ball back to the pitcher.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, a couple of guys, I mean, I know at least one. I think Koosman, he threw one out, the rocket out there at him one time, and Koosman hauled him out there, and he said, "Don't you ever do that again."
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. Not everybody thought it was just what the doctor ordered, you know. But, you know, no doubting his dedication and his grasp on how to call a game back there.
Yeah, you get
when you're catching, you know, the arms the likes of which we had, you're smarter as a catcher too.
Right. Well, yes, of course. Yeah. You know, and in Shamsky's book, he mentions that, and I don't know if this is true or not, but he quotes Bench as saying, you know, if Grote were on our team, I'd be a third baseman. And Johnny Bench is, in my opinion, the best catcher of all time. So.
Yeah, you know, hey, Tom Seaver who went to Cincinnati after the Mets traded him, would not argue with you there.
Yeah. So, and then also and we won't stay on the Mets the whole time, because I know there's other stuff to your life and your career, but I do want to talk about, because you do have the book, and I apologize because I do want to read your book, and I will get it and read it.
Won't take you long. Yeah. It's just a little over 200 pages. It's
okay.
It's a little bit longer than Old Man and the Sea.
All right.
Not that my name and Hemingway should be in the same sentence, but there you go.
Yeah. Well, it just was. So at the end of the day, the other point that Shamsky made in his book, and I thought it was really interesting, because I've run this by a few friends, not Met fans and non-Met fans, was that, you know, obviously the loss to Hodges, the death of Gil Hodges, the sudden death of Gil Hodges, heart attack.
Yes.
Around ago, 47 years old, I think.
Too young.
Good God. And Art said in his book, you know, if Gil had stayed alive, he believes that the Mets would have won multiple championships. What are your thoughts?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Hodges, You know, I had my problems with him. I struggled a little bit with authority. I graded under authority, and Gil was an authoritarian. It was his way or the highway. And of course, I eventually was put on the highway. But, you know, with the perspective of age and hopefully a little maturity, Gil Hodges was an incredible element because if you look at his lineups and what he was looking for and how he was casting around trying to find what that team was all about early on. Everybody got a chance to play there. Everybody. Rod Gasper, Amos Otis, whom they traded, you know, eventually sent to the minor leagues, traded him to Kansas City, and he became an all-star is all. Another terrible deal the Mets made trying to get a third baseman. You think about, they traded Nolan Ryan and Amos Otis to try to get a third baseman that they never came up with. You tell me how you could have had two worse trades than that, with the perspective of history, of course. Yeah. But Hodges, you watch him handle the game. And of course, when I did do my book, I went back and looked at all of the lineups, which you can get on Baseball Reference. And you look at how he handled the games. You look at the play-by-play sheets of the games, and it reminded me of so many games, you know, where Hodges needed to make a move, and when he made a move, you understood exactly what he was doing. The game never got in front of him. He was always on top of the game, and made, in that 69 season, he made so many moves that I thought were incredibly acute and on the mark, you know, and pinch hitting, 4 outfielders. He did all kinds of interesting and creative things, but you understood it. I played for Gene Mock, who could do some interesting things as a manager, but you didn't always understand what he was doing. And I think, you know, he was brilliant in his concept of the game, but it was complex, and it resolved itself in a complex way. And I think when you're managing like Hodges, his stuff resolved itself in a simple way, and you know, knuckleheads like me could understand it. And you know, he was an interesting man. You know, 2 heart attacks, and the second one killed him. But he was a Marine in World War II, and spent. He was on Okinawa for that horrible series of battles there. Before he went to Okinawa with the Marines, Hodges was on Tinian Island in the Marianas. My dad, who was in the 20th Air Force as a gunner in the B-29, my dad went to Tinian at the end of March 1945. Hodges had left the beginning of March 1945 with the Marines heading for Okinawa, and that horrendous series of battles there. So my dad and Hodges, I found out a while back, were on the same island in the Marianas during World War II, just not at the same time. It was an interesting little thing I found out.
Ron, your dad was a Marine also?
My dad was in the Army Air Corps. Okay. 20th Air Force, B-29s. Gotcha. Curtis LeMay ran that outfit, and you know, they flew 16-hour missions, most of them over over Japan.
Yeah, yeah. My dad was a Marine. You know, God bless those guys. I mean, it's just such a.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. I just finished reading the book Way about the Marines in Vietnam and the Tet Offensive in 1968. Bowden's book, incredible read about the turning point in that war. Not one we put in the win column, but. Yeah, all about the Marines and how they, you know, fed them into that mall when they got surprised in Way in January of 1968.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen.
I'm a big history buff, and you know, it's funny. The military is better because I wasn't a part of it, but I've always been interested in military history. and especially aircraft history because my dad was a flyer during World War II.
Awesome. So before we move on from the Mets, let me just say this. So in 1970 or so, which is probably, I think, your last year with the Mets, and it may have been the winter of 70, I'm not sure, but I was playing Little League Baseball. We had an all-star dinner in Lindenhurst, Long Island.
Yeah.
And you were the guest speaker. And we actually met and spoke. And
oh, wow.
you know, it was great for the fact, not that you just came and spoke. You spent time, we came up to you individually. You spent time with us. But I remember one thing still to this day that you said about the game of baseball and how you love the game of baseball. And one of the things you said was, I like the fact that it's not controlled by a clock.
Yeah.
It kind of brings me to the new rule changes and the things we're seeing now with baseball. What are your thoughts on all this stuff, you know, and the proposed thing?
Yeah. Baseball, yeah, no, like everything else in our world, including Major League Baseball, it is through the COVID-19 lens. Everything. I'm not a great big fan of our current commissioner of baseball, Manfred. I think he likes being commissioner, but I'm not so sure he really likes baseball. He seems to happily change some things that I think are fundamental to the structure of the best game. You know, if your goal is to, you know, speed things up, you know, how about educating people about the little pieces of baseball? How about working harder and helping people understand the nuance and letting people into some of the new changes when you're calling timeout and reviewing a play on videotape? Why don't you let people in on the discussions? Why don't you put that video up on the board and let's see how you arrive at that decision while we're sitting there doing nothing? And maybe the game would be enriched by that. And you know, I just think a lot of these rules that have taken out hard slides into second base and tough slides into catchers, and you know, the 15 or 20-second rule for pitchers, I have no problem with that. Hurry up. The putting a guy on second base in extra innings, you know, in this hurry up segment of baseball, so-called baseball season, okay, it probably makes sense right now. I don't want to see it in the regular season if and when we get back to 162 games.
Yeah.
But I think you know, baseball right now, it's got to be strange for the guys. You know, you had spring training and then you had the COVID break and then you come back. It's like, hurry up and get ready. And you're seeing a lot of little injuries that look like guys not quite in baseball shape and pulling little stuff here and there. But that's almost unavoidable. I think the whole point to baseball right now is let's get to the 16 teams so we can start the playoffs regardless of who it is, and make a little, you know, playoff television money for Major League Baseball.
Well, here's one thing that I do think is going to stick, and I have not liked this since the beginning when it came in. Probably your last year with the Yankees, I think maybe is when it started, the designated hitter.
Yeah.
I get the fact that it keeps guys active, it keeps guys involved, but when you know, to me, watching and you know, bunting, you know, a pitcher helping himself, all these things to me is part of the game, and I'm sorry to say that I think it's gone.
Yeah, I might not disagree with you there either. I think they're trying a bunch of things now in this COVID season. You know, they're just trying stuff.
Yeah.
Because they can, and that's the one. I didn't think baseball got more interesting with the DH, although it made Ron Bloomberg a few bucks as the first ever DH. And he could handle it. I wasn't any good at it. I would have been the first DH if Boston had started a left-handed pitcher, but they started a right-hander. I was the DH the next day, and I didn't do very well at it. It wouldn't have worked for me. I couldn't handle it. But I don't see where it makes the game more interesting. I think and especially late in the game, are you going to leave that pitcher in there? Are you going to pinch hit for him?
Right.
You need 25 guys without the DH. When you have the DH, you don't need 25 guys on your roster.
Right.
So I don't think. I think the head game in baseball, the nuance of baseball, the more you remove the little pieces of the game that are important in and of themselves and turn it into what sometimes looks like a home run hitting contest, I don't think you're doing a service to the game. And I worry about, his stewardship. Rob Manfred, to me, hasn't done anything too brilliant for baseball.
I'm in lockstep with you there, Ron. So you finished your career a year with Montreal, and then you finish it with the Yankee team. Quite frankly, that isn't very good. Of all the Yankee teams that have been amazing and awesome and the runs that they've had, I mean that.
I didn't make them any better going to the Yankees, but I'll tell you what. I did say this to someone one time when I walked on the field at Yankee Stadium the very first time in my pinstripes, wearing number 14. Interestingly enough, I got a little chill. I got the hairs on the back of my neck when I walked out there and looked at the facade and the monuments out in center field in old Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
I got a charge out of that. The quote was, I was not prepared to be awed, but I was, and it was cool. And I got to play for Ralph Houck, who I thought was one of the most decent people that, speaking of World War II veterans, I got to play for one of the grand gentlemen in the game of baseball for what he went through in World War II as a Ranger. He was the most decent guy to play for. And I'm not sure I was worthy of that either, but he was a really good guy.
Yeah, he seemed like it. And you're right. I mean, there's no more legendary team in all of baseball than the New York Yankees. Nobody would argue that. Not even somebody who's been a Mets fan for 50 plus years. Yeah. But I have to ask you also, growing up, obviously, fine baseball player, high school and college, University of Maryland, but you're from Baltimore. Who did you root for a team growing up? Was it the Orioles or?
The Orioles were our team, and interestingly, there was a young third baseman that came up I was a big fan of his, Brooks Robinson. They are forever tied together because of the catch.
Yeah.
But Gus Triandos was the catcher for the Orioles, and my dad actually worked at a automobile dealership in Baltimore, and in the off season they brought Triandos in to help sell cars, and my dad and Gus became pretty good friends, and he came to my house one time. Here I am, a young kid trying to play amateur baseball, and you don't know how good you're going to be. You never know. Right. Until it's time. But here comes Big Gus walking in our house. He invited him to dinner, and Gus showed up, and it was cool. And my dad and he always had a good relationship. I'd go to Philadelphia in my first year, 1965. Gus was on the Philadelphia Phillies, and I saw him in spring training with the Phillies, and reminded him that he had given me a trophy at a dinner that he was the speaker at when I was a kid in Baltimore. So I walk up to home plate, and there's Gus behind the plate, and telling me how you're really making me feel old, and called me a fastball, and I hit it for a home run off of Dallas Green. But in that short center field they had in the old ballpark in St. Petersburg. But Gus was also a part of another play I made that you're not going to see very often. In I think it was 1965, but Gus tagged up on a fly ball that I caught, sort of running away from home plate. Gus was at third base. I caught it, spun, and threw the ball to Ed Kranepool, who was the cutoff guy.
Wow.
Eddie cut it off, turned and threw it to home, and they got Gus, who was still lumbering down third base. not very often that you can cut off the throw and get the guy at home plate on a tag up at third base on a fly ball to right field.
That's cool.
Gus was one of the slowest humans that ever played the game.
That's good. Listen, I mean, that's so. So we get through the Yankees, and you retire, and you have quite a long career in the media with sports.
Yeah. Well, I stumbled into that and WCBS in New York with the help of Dave Marish, a guy that was the anchor man there, and he and I had met one another. He came to my last spring training with the Braves when I got released and did a story on my last go-round, and he and I became friends, and we are still friends. I just spoke with David on the phone the other night. He lives outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and does these long-form news interviews on a PBS radio station in Santa Fe. So Marish is still doing what he wants to do, still being a great news guy, which is what he always was. And, you know, he, I think, helped open the door a little bit, and they gave me a shot at it at WCBS. And I bounced around a little bit here, there. At WCBS, I went to Milwaukee, came from Milwaukee to New Orleans, where I am right now, and, you know, and went out to Phoenix for a little bit, and then came back to New Orleans. In all, I did about 20 years of local television sports. I was very fortunate. It opened a lot of doors. It opened my mind a little bit to writing, and I don't think my book would have happened without the experience I had writing copy for myself all those years. And you know, I always enjoyed good writing. I was a pretty good reader, and I think it all kind of, you know, came together. So I was very fortunate, you know, one thing led to another, not with any overriding game plan. It just happened.
Yeah. Well, listen, a great career, you know, on and off the field, Ron, obviously, and now you're in Louisiana. You settled, obviously retired in Louisiana now?
Yeah, my last go round on local TV here was back in 94, 95. I was done. And, you know, I started doing some color for the AAA team here. We had a AAA team here up and through last season, actually. The team moved to Wichita, and of course, minor league baseball right now. When we talk about the COVID season, minor league baseball is really taking the brunt of the COVID-19 because there isn't any minor league season right now, and those people that own those franchises, they're paying a bigger price because there's no minor league season. Yeah. What it will be next year, once we get through, you know, this first go around with the COVID, what it'll be next year? Will it be AA, AAA, and maybe a little extended spring training? We don't know what the structure is going to be, and everybody's pretty curious about that. Yeah,
let's hope and pray that this thing, for everybody's sake, and obviously,
sure,
there's people that
they'll get there. They'll get to a place where we can maybe, you know, conduct more normal relations. We'll get there. You know, we will.
Yeah.
It's just so dark right now, and you know, when you start thinking of 175,000 people who aren't here anymore because of this virus that was supposedly going to disappear miraculously, you know, we'll figure it out. Though there will be a vaccine, there'll be better therapies for it, and we'll get to a more normal existence, but we're not there yet.
No. And my heart aches, obviously, for the people who have lost loved ones, and at the end of the day, but also for the young people who have lost their senior year in high school or college. They're playing sports, or they you know, they're just, you know, it's really not fair.
Oh,
but you know, it's tough.
It sucked the life out of everybody's existence. But yeah, you nailed it. I've got I've got 6 grandkids, and 2 of them are coming out of high school and, you know, didn't have a regular graduation. And, you know, there's a couple of them in college trying to figure out, you know, how to negotiate classes online and whatnot. Young people, you know, trying to figure out what you're going to do for a living with, you know, the COVID knocking us back economically, and when do we get to some semblance of normalcy. It's a pretty rough deal for them. Us old retired people, we just have to use our heads and try to be safe. But you know, unless we break the whole system of, you know, of investment and Social Security, us old people aren't the problem. And although we do not want to get, we do not want to experiment with this virus, that's for sure. I'm 76 years old. I can do without it.
Right. We have a gentleman here in town by the name of Terry Hanratty. I don't know if you remember Terry.
Yeah, I do know his name.
Terry's a good guy. He actually had it. And we have a little radio show too, which we'd like to have you come on eventually, called the Clubhouse. And Terry's been on, and Terry had COVID, and he said if it wasn't for my daughter demanding me to quit smoking 3 years ago, I would have died from this. And
oh yeah, man, those comorbidities and things like that. Absolutely. I mean, you know, the crazy thing about it is it doesn't care where you are on the political spectrum. Yeah. You know, it does seem to be more, you know, us older folks, our T cells are not quite as numerous, and our, you know, ability to handle those kind of things is not as aggressive. So you don't want to get it if you're an older person, but young people, you know, even to the point of being a little careless about themselves, which I don't recommend, in their distancing and mask wearing and whatnot. I don't think it's anything we should ever take lightly, and it is not a political issue. It is science, and we need to do the best thing to get through it the best way, and listen to science.
Understand. Have you come across a friend of mine, Archie Manning, down in your travels?
You know, I don't see much Archie. Obviously, I covered him when he was a football player for the Saints, and one of the most decent guys, and you know, how ironic he has 2 sons who both have won Super Bowls as quarterbacks, you know, with Peyton and Eli, and you know, how incredible that you raise 2 sons, both of whom go further in the game of football than you did, and Archie was a pretty good player.
He was a great player, and he got the you know what beat out of him when he played for those Saints.
Oh boy, they didn't do much for him. They didn't do much for him here. He had 1 year where they were 500, where he had a pretty good offense around him. Yeah. But most of the time he was running for his life.
Yes, he was. You know, he has. I obviously, you know, he had obviously Peyton, Eli, and what they've done. But Cooper Manning was supposedly, and Archie has told me this because I worked with him when I was at the Football Foundation, the best athlete of the 3.
Really?
Cooper has a son. His name is Archie.
Yes.
Have you heard about this? I mean, they're saying right now he's like a sophomore in high school. He's already got Division I offers from like 6 different schools, that he might be the best of all of them.
Cooper was another decent. I mean, you know, Archie's kids were. I'll tell you what.
Good family. Good family.
They were. It's how you want your kids to grow up. That's all I can tell you. And we saw a lot of them. We saw a lot of those kids, especially Peyton. I covered him in high school. And you know, when you wanted an interview, you called the house and you said, can we do something? And they'd say, here's a good time. Can you come here at this time? And they were there, and you did what you needed to do, because they were all, you know, going to go on to college, and that was a story in sports in New Orleans. And you could always get them, and they were always available. If you know, called up and asked for them, they showed up on time, ready to go. And yeah, it's quite a family. It's amazing. I always thought that Archie, you know, he missed out. He could have sold his sperm, you know, for for quarterbacks, for sure.
That's a classic one. All right. Last question from me, and then this is it kind of transcends the Met, my Met fandom, and you, and a TV show that I love. Everybody loves Raymond. Great show. I know every episode almost by heart, and the one with you guys in it was a classic. Well, how was your experience with that?
Everybody Loves Raymond.
Yeah.
They were great to us. Oh yeah. You know, the funny thing about that is they ended up bringing my membership up to snuff in AFTRA. So okay. I ended up vested at a very low level, but I ended up vested in the retirement program at AFTRA because of that appearance on the show. And we still get residuals. It's maybe $100 a year, but we still get residuals because the show was such a hit. But Ray Romano and everybody else there connected to Everybody Loves Raymond. They treated us like kings, and it was a wonderful experience. And like I said, people still go, hey, that episode with the Mets on it still gets played somewhere on the cable, somewhere out there in the ether. It hasn't gone away. So we'll get a check for $35 or something like that from AFTRA for residuals, and we get 3 or 4 a year.
All right, Ron, I'm gonna wrap this up. I'm gonna queue up this video one more time so we can watch it together. And as I do that, I would like you to tell people where they can get the book, how they can find it, and
just think of Amazon. You can get it from Amazon, and is this playing or is it just still? On my screen, it's kind of frozen.
Yeah, I'm gonna play it now.
There we go. Oh. Oh, what a play! Throw it. Frank Robinson did the right thing, though. He waited until I caught it and did the right thing. He was a smart player. And I came up. I got rid of it pretty good. I mean, it's interesting how I got back to my feet.
No, listen, you really did. You jumped right up and got that ball back in the infield. So
I had so much forward momentum, and I know a lot of people on the bench. I did one of these Zooms with the Mets, and Ed Greenpool was there, and I said, I know what you guys were doing on the bench. You were going, no. Oh my God, what a catch! It's like don't try for it. But you know what? You look at the angle I took. Oh. I got to the ball on the best angle I could get there. Just get there. Well, there wasn't any chance for me to think about playing it on a hop or taking a steeper angle to the ball. If I took a steeper angle, I might not have got to it. So I don't know.
That might go inside the park home run if that ball gets by.
Yeah, I never see Tommy Agee would have probably run it down, but we might have given up a couple of runs. It might have turned that game around, turned the series around, because we didn't score in the bottom of the 9th. We scored in the bottom of the 10th to win it.
That's right. And if this still picture you have behind you over your left shoulder.
Over here, that might be that frame of the catch. It's probably not an accident either.
Hey, look at just that picture and where the ball is. They would be like, how does
it's in the glove?
Yeah.
It's in the glove. Yeah, I used to, anybody that wants to needle me will say, you caught it on a hop, right?
Oh, no way. Absolutely.
No, let's not monkey with history.
No.
No, it was, look, it's like somebody asked me one time, how long are you going to keep trying to make a career out of one catch? And I said, how much time have I got, And at the age of 76, that mortality is looms a little larger than it did when you were 55, 60.
Well, let me tell you, your career was much more than the catch. The catch was, in my opinion, one of the greatest catches in World Series history. Ron, I thank you for those memories as a young Mets fan, as a person. I thank you for your time today, and God bless you. Stay well. Keep hitting them straight.
Yeah, same to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Same to you, David. You're welcome. Nice to be here.
All right. Thank you very much.